you can get a bit complacent when you're a bit stressed. So just improve in those knowledge gaps and go again. It's fairly that straightforward. Don't be ashamed. Nobody's perfect, and everyone learns differently. Hi, I'm Sonny, and I'm your host. Oh, that was close. And welcome to Someone Else's Cloud. Hi, I'm Sonny, and I'm your host, and welcome to Someone Else's Cloud, a video podcast about Microsoft Azure, all things cloud computing, DevOps, and my personal experiences as a consultant in cloud engineering. This is episode 3, and today we'll be talking about the AZ301 Azure Architect Design Exam. I'll share with you my process, the study materials I used, and followed by my thoughts on the new AZ304 exam. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe to the video. We're also available on all major podcasting platforms, so Apple iTunes, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, and TuneIn Radio. Okay, so updates. Where have I been? Melbourne, Victoria was in stage 4 lockdown last year for over 100 plus days. That's when I took the opportunity to do all the exams and shoot the first 2 episodes. My plan was actually to shoot this episode in November because it continues on from the AZ300 exam. But we unlocked in November. Then holiday season came. I went away back to Canberra. And yeah, just this is where we're at now. Funny enough, we're actually in a snap 5-day lockdown at the moment, which just started at midnight last night. So, why not shoot a video? On a positive note, 2 weeks ago, I went back into the office. First time in the office, probably for over nearly a year anyway. There was probably only about maybe 5 to 10% of people, I think, there. So it was still very quiet. It was good to see people, see their faces, and interact again with people at work. But it kind of disrupted my flow too, because I've been working from home for so long. So having a monitor with an average resolution that was not even white, it was kind of had this pink tone. I don't want to sound like I'm more fancy, but I mean, normal colors is nice. So yeah, that's where I've been. I do plan on sitting now the AZ400 design and implementing Microsoft DevOps solutions this year, and then the AZ500, which is a security exam. So yeah, what a better time to start doing the episodes again. The whole reason why I started this was to sort of force me to learn, but then educate others while I was out there. I don't know what I just said there. I mean, to educate others out there. Yeah, so there's been some little updates in the Microsoft space. So this is quite interesting. There was an update from Microsoft at the end of January this year. Role-specific certs will now expire in a year from June 2021. So that means if you've certified after June 2021, your certs will now be only valid for a year rather than 2. And then the other one is starting March 2021, you have up to 6 months before your expiry to do an online free renewal assessment. So that means Microsoft are giving you the opportunity to sit a free exam to keep your credentials current, rather than you having to go sit an upgrade exam and pay for it and everything else. There's also going to be a free collection of curated learning modules for each renewal assessment. So yeah, I think they're just aware of the current situations. Everyone working from home. There's now these online renewal assessments, and it will help people stay, I guess, certified now easier, and you don't have to pay, which is great. So keep that in mind when you're doing your exams. And let's get this episode started. Okay, so when I did these exams back in September, I actually started with the AZ103 exam, which is the the Azure Administrator exam, which has now been retired and is now the AZ 104 exam. So obviously they're very similar. My first episode was about 103, even though it had already retired. There'd only be about, I think, 10-15% difference. This exam, which is the AZ 301, Microsoft Azure Design, Architect Design exam, I actually did this one before I did the AZ 300 exam. And the reason being is because I felt that the design exam was more theory-based and the 300 exam would be more hands-on. And that was the case. So I actually did this exam, the AZ 301, before I did the 300. And then the 300 I actually scored the highest. I would recommend that you, if you haven't done an exam for a while, start with the Azure Administrator just to get your mindset in that space and get familiar with doing exams. And it's always good to refresh in the Azure skills because you don't use everything day to day. I went through the same process as the other one. So I followed the Cloud Guru, the AZ 301 Microsoft Azure Architect Design course. That was quite beneficial. You know, I do like the Cloud Guru videos. I think they're actually made by Linux Academy. I continued to do the Whizlab test exams. The Whizlab test exams were quite beneficial because I used them to gauge my knowledge and where my gaps were. So the good thing about when you get things wrong, there's actually documentation to explain what is the right answer and what is the wrong. But then there's also links to Microsoft documentation to sort of help you verify and validate, the reasons why things are right. So that's super handy. I actually didn't do any real hands-on labs. I still had my lab from the AZ 103 exam, and I used the same components, I guess. So I had a Windows 10 PC, and I enabled Hyper-V on that just so I could build an Active Directory server and an AAD Connect server. And then I basically used Terraform to build out Azure components to test, but I didn't really use many hands-on. I didn't really build much for this exam. It was all more theory. So follow your own process on how you like to learn. Okay, so just want to comment that the AZ 301 exam was retired on the 30th of September 2020, and it's been replaced by the AZ 304 exam. So the Azure skills measured by the exam for the AZ 301 exam determine workload requirements 10 to 15%. So make sure you cover, Azure Monitor, alerts, conditions, monitoring capability, which is an interesting one. Understand capacity limits too for email notifications, text messages, and things like that. Application insights and use cases, so application performance, latency, and errors. So just understanding how to utilize, I guess, application insights to monitor your application workloads. Event Grid, Event Hub, just understanding the differences of an event handler and data ingestion service, and how you aggregate your logs. Azure Functions is pretty common. Understand app service plans as well. Design for identity and security, which is 20 to 25%. Privileged identity management is probably more around the functionality and licensing. So functionality being what would you use it for, potentially conditional access as well. So they try to trick you on what privileged identity management does. So PIM versus other things like conditional access. Know the licensing requirements as well, and the just-in-time configuration, I guess, because you can set time limits and things like that, as well as notifications to group owners and elevation. Managed identities, I would imagine this is probably more important in the AZ 304, just moving to more of a security model. Things that we're doing at work now, a lot of them are now revolving around managed identities. So example is virtual machines accessing Azure Key Vault and things like that. Azure identity providers, so just understanding the Azure AD B2C and B2B sort of options that are available out there. Azure AD configuration and management, so understanding differences between password hash sync, pass-through authentication, PTA that is. Know how to configure AAD Connect, which is custom domains, the licenses and things like that. Design a data platform solution, which is 15 to 20%. Storage accounts is a big one across all the exams, really. Just knowing the differences between storage V1, V2, blob storage, SAS tokens as well, which is shared access signature tokens. Know what you can do with them. So time, you can set expiry dates. You can set specific or granular controls on what you can or can't do with that token access. And understand, I guess, the replication and archive options. Fairly important for all the DR scenarios, questions that you may get. Azure Store Simple, so just know benefits around transparent integration, reduced costs, and disaster recovery. Azure Data Factory, understand the use cases for data migrations. I feel like this could be more of a hot topic in AZ304. We're currently trying to use it at work for some migration work. Understand Azure SQL licensing and software assurance, different types of licensing methods, so vCore, DTU, and hybrid license benefits. You can basically take your on-prem licenses and use them in cloud. Know the backup and long-term retentions and app service plans. So, there's questions around the capability of a free versus shared or dedicated and isolated tiers. So just know the differences between the plans. That may come up quite frequently. Okay, so design a business continuity strategy, which is 15 to 20%. Know Azure Site Recovery. A lot of the cases for Azure Site Recovery has been around on-prem migration workloads rather than Azure to Azure replication, which may come in the future for the AZ304 exam. So just be mindful of the use cases for Azure Site Recovery. Azure Backups is fairly straightforward, so understand the replication methods, which is based on your storage type, retention policies, the limits, and things like that. The design will ask about data retention and things like that. Know how to do Azure resource template deployments, stock standard from the AZ 103/104, which is the Azure Administrator exam. Web app sort of configuration, so know how to scale out the triggers, configuration around them. Traffic manager, routing methods is a big one, I guess. Knowing how to prioritize traffic, weighted performance, I guess, loading and geographical loading. Okay, so I'm back. Had a little malfunction with the camera. During the break, I somehow broke the HDMI port on my other camera. So when I film 4K on this camera, it overheats. So hopefully I can last through the rest of the episode without it turning off. So back to where I was. Design for deployment, migration, and integration. I think I spoke about this already, but I'll continue on, which is 10 to 15%. So know your Azure application gateway, know the load balancing methods, know about the web application firewall. You'll be asked about that, and you'll probably be tricked, I guess, or you'll be asked about questions between Traffic Manager and the Azure application gateway. So know the differences. One's layer 7 routing, the other one's more DNS related. Know Azure API gateways, the authentication, SSL termination, rate limiting and things like that. Azure SQL databases, so instances, migration examples, and pricing tiers. They're pretty common for the design side of things. Azure Container Registry, so know the use cases and the benefits. Talks about migrating applications to containers and then basically hosting them in Kubernetes or something. So Azure Kubernetes is another thing to know. Azure Logic App Services, just know the use cases for them. So just workflowing and integration. Azure Functions, I think already raised. Azure Service Bus, so just know use cases around that as well and why you'd use them. Design and infrastructure strategy, which is 15 to 20%. So virtual networks is obviously a big one. So know virtual networks, subnet configuration and management, including service endpoints, VNet peering, understand, I guess, how VNet peering works, non-overlapping addresses, the default routes as well is an interesting one, and express route and site-to-site VPN connections. Just know the use cases as well and how they tie into VNets as well. Know how gateway subnets work, local subnets. Again, non-overlapping address spaces, which is pretty common. And the VPN gateway SKUs. I don't think I had many questions about that. Pretty common. And Azure Migrate, so know the assessments, the recommendations, cost estimates, and things around Azure Migrate. And then, so just the standard helpful tips really is I've got here understand the differences of app service plans, but it's really understand all plans of most things. So Azure SQL, the app services, which web apps will run on, function apps. Know the different types of storage accounts, the replications, the use cases for archiving, and the benefits of them. There's a big emphasis on DR as well. So part of design will be able to cater for high availability and disaster recovery. Again, scenario-based questions, focus on the question. Microsoft will throw a big use case or case study at you with a lot of moving parts. Just sort of break it down, read the question, and then just find the relevant information associated to that question, because there's a lot of distraction, I guess, in the scenario-based questions. It kind of overloads you a bit, so just be prepared for that. Focus on certain keywords. There's certain things such as costs should be minimized, so that's generally the cheapest option, but it needs to meet the requirements too. So they try and trick you there on some things. Again, data center, region failover. Just be aware of those use cases because you need to meet those requirements. So they might try and fool you there. And again, always trust your gut with answers. If you don't back yourself with some of these questions, I guess, or if you don't back yourself in the exams, you'll be sitting there for a long time second guessing yourself. So, if you fail, just learn from that and move on and try again. Because, exams are quite stressful and, you can lose focus under stress as well. So just you can only roll the dice and see where it goes. And if you don't succeed, just improve and roll the dice again. There's only one way. Don't be ashamed to fail. So I feel like it's the best way to learn. So thoughts on the AZ304 exam. So I think there's going to be a few new things that may be discussed on the exam, which is the Azure Sentinel, I think, will come into play. More around privileged identity management as well, and Azure Firewall. Azure Firewall and Sentinel, I don't believe, are on the AZ301. There'll be some application insights and Azure Monitor, I think, probably more in depth because there's Azure Monitor for VMs now. There'll be probably more on private endpoints, there'll be things on private endpoint because that was not in the AZ301. So that'll be a new thing. So private endpoints are pretty much associating services, I guess, technically putting things into your VNet, let's say. So it'll allow, especially for where I work, it's helped us consume more PaaS services because we can hook them into our own VNets. Azure Site Recovery, I feel like there'll be more on that. There'll be probably more Azure to Azure sort of replication as well. Managed identities, I think I mentioned that. That is managed identities is probably going to be a standard sort of pattern around accessing, I guess, secure information. The example I had before was virtual machines using a managed identity to access key vaults. So, you can enable managed identities on app services as well. So I think that's going to be pretty common. So rather than using credentials to access a key vault, you just use the identity of the virtual machine. There'll be, I think, Azure DevOps as well. They're sort of trying to push more, I guess, automation as well as their tools. So, the boards, pipelines, artifacts as well. But that's pretty much it for the AZ301 exam. Thanks for watching, and I hope this has helped in some sort of way. If you're watching this on YouTube, like and subscribe to the video. And if you're listening to it on one of the podcasting platforms, follow the channel. Don't be afraid to fail when you're doing the exams. Like I said before, you can get a bit complacent when you're a bit stressed. So just improve in those knowledge gaps and go again. It's fairly that straightforward. Don't be ashamed. Nobody's perfect. And everyone learns differently. I'll be making more videos about less exams and probably more about labs and how I do things. I had to build a lab using Terraform and other things around DevOps and any other future things that I do. Like I said, I started this channel to sort of force myself to continually learn. And while doing that, use this as a creative outlet to create videos, but then help educate others out there that sort of want to learn, I guess, the things that I'm learning. And if you're sitting in any exams, good luck. Thanks for tuning in, and I'm signing out. Catch ya.